Hello, hello, hello out there in the wide world of the interwebs. Whether you are joining live and it's just about 9:53 a.m. on Wednesday, June 2nd, where I am, the west coast of Northern California. You might be in a different time zone. I say good evening to those of you where it might be evening time, or good afternoon. It's later in the day. Good morning if you're in my time zone. And certainly welcome to anyone watching the replay as well. So I love being able to have some dialogue live. So welcome. I see some of you joining, and it's always really delightful to have some live interaction. Any questions, shares, comments, agreements, disagreements, all of that is welcome. And also, if you're watching the replay right now, I love you also bringing your comments into the space so that we can continue the dialogue, even if it's just in text, in the written word. I am just coming home after almost 10 days up near Mount Shasta. So it's haven't been a lot on any kind of screen for a while, and I definitely haven't been talking to myself on a screen for a while. So thank you for being with me as I muddle my way through this morning. I want to talk about power. And specifically today, I want to talk a little bit about why I think that why we resist our own power, why we're afraid of it. I work with a lot of people who will say something at some point about there's a couple ways that I hear this. One is like, oh, I've been playing small, or I'm, that word, that phrase, which I'm not a big fan of, but this idea around playing small, and a lot of like, I've been doing that, I'm doing that, I don't know how to not do that, I keep doing that, why do I keep doing, this playing small or limiting myself, or that's kind of a whole piece. And then I also hear a lot of I'm too much. I'm too much for other people. I'm afraid that I'm too powerful. I'm afraid that if I really bring it, like, I'll be too much for the people around me. Nobody can meet me. Nobody can hold me. I'm too much. So maybe some of you resonate with one or the other of that, or you have your own. If there's some other way that you notice this some resistance or fear of your own power showing up, you could put it in the comments. And I think there's a lot of ways that can arise, but there's often this sense. And specifically today, well, there's a few different threads that I want to pull on. One is that there really is this, I guess the thread that I want to pull on the most, and what holds all the different pieces of this thread, is that often the way that I see people work with this, or even the language that gets used, or somehow the way that conversation goes a lot, it has some either explicit or implicit, sort of subtle or not so subtle, making it about the other person. So I see Shell saying that she says both of those things, right? They can. We have many. All of us have many ways that we're like, I'm too much. I'm too powerful. And I think even about that beautiful Marianne Williamson quote, which I won't quote the whole thing, and I couldn't even if I was reading it, but it's so beautiful, and it really is such a powerful statement. But where the first line is, it is not our darkness which most scares us, but our light. And but then at the bottom, at the very end, it sort of comes back around, and there's this question of like, who am I to be big, bold, beautiful, bright? And I don't actually, it's not that that's inaccurate. I think it's incomplete. And even this idea of I'm too much for other people, or I'll scare other people, or other people tell me I'm too much, or um, even relaying experiences of like, oh, when I step into my power, then dot, dot, dot happens. That's some negative consequence. There often is this sense of putting it out into external circumstances or onto other people. And I think if you were to ask people, nobody would actually blame other people for it, but there's often this way that that's subtly baked in, like, well, if they could, if I wasn't too much for them, then I wouldn't have to dim my light. Or, if it didn't have this impact, then I wouldn't need to play small. Or if they just made it safe somehow. And what I really believe is this sort of subtle, and I'll call it blaming of others. I mean, it's an externalization. And I believe that truly what it comes down to is that we are actually afraid of our own power. And not, yes, we're afraid of the impact on other people. Partly, and this is one of the threads, is that quote, which is, with great power comes great responsibility. And the tricky part of that is a lot of us say that, and we're usually sort of pointing at someone else. And I think if we're actually honest, this is kind of where I'm going to end up at the end, but I'll just, drop it in here at the beginning. If we're really honest, most of us don't want that responsibility. So we kind of want the power, or we maybe don't want it, or we're afraid to want it. We want it, but we're not sure if we want it. We're not sure if it's okay that we want it. But we actually not, I think there's a lot of hesitation of wanting that responsibility. What if my impact is great? And what if I can't trust myself with that impact? So I think often we think like, oh, if I have a big impact, other people might attack me, which is a valid fear. I'm not dismissing that, but I want to pull on a different thread, because I think that that's the thread that gets the most airtime, gets the most attention. And this other thread, which is, oh, but what if I don't actually have the impact that I want to have? Or what if I don't want to take the responsibility of what it is to have a powerful impact, or to be as powerful as I am, and that it actually does require great responsibility, and that it's easier for our own selves to, sometimes it's not even like, oh, playing small, like we're going to be teeny tiny. It's more like we don't want to be teeny tiny, but we also don't want to be, really powerful, or really have a wide reach, or really, and I don't even mean that by, number of followers or impact in the world or amount of money. I just mean to even within just our family or our community or where we are, or to move through the world, truly like knowing that we have a wide impact wherever we go. And to deny that is actually I would say, is to wield unconscious power. To deny that we have that kind of impact as we move through the world. And that is actually where I think power becomes dangerous, more dangerous. Certainly there are people who know they have power and wield it unwisely, or unwell in harmful ways. But more people probably actually wield their power in an unhelpful way by denying the power that they have, or not wanting to have it, sort of pretending, not being honest about, actually, when I walk in a room, I do have an impact. And that actually, it doesn't mean I need to walk on eggshells and I can't be myself. And, I'm not allowed to say this on the internet, or, whatever all our little stories are that we use to keep ourselves in that place, and to deny the impact we have, and then to reject the responsibility that we have. But actually that is a responsibility. And I'm up to the game of that. I am actually willing to be in the game of, I could fuck up, I could hurt somebody, but I'm here for it, right? I'm here for it. I'm actually here for the wideness of my impact, for the power of it, for the magnitude of it, whatever that is, and however that looks. So that's one sort of thread on that, but there's also this place, and I hear when you say this, Cheryl, also you said sometimes it feels like an internal lack of trust. Yes. So I think there's a lack of trust. Will I use my power well? That's one piece. The other is, what I find a lot actually with people is especially in that realm where it comes up like, oh, I'm too much for other people, is that when I really hone in with someone, what we find is they're too much for themselves. And a lot of people where this is the case, is that there are habits of dissipating energy, dissipating themselves way out in order to not actually have to be with the magnitude of their own energetic power, because it's too much for themselves. And then we externalize it and we say, other people can't meet me, other people can't hold me, I'm too big, I'm too much. People tell me I'm too much. And it's like, oh, but have you taken the time to be with the magnitude of your own power? And oftentimes what happens is we're actually afraid of ourselves. I think actually of, who's that X-Men character? Someone's going to know it. It's Phoenix, and then there's the Dark Phoenix piece, but really, this was in the comics. I was a total X-Men geek, but obviously haven't done that in a while. Can't remember her name. And her fear of her own power, actually, she was more powerful than even Professor X, right? This was the piece. She was so powerful, and we're afraid of that. And most of what we have seen in terms of the expression of power, or the energetic expression of our magnitude, is that it's this very polarized experience. It's either just, letting it all loose and doing whatever we want and just expressing power sort of willy-nilly, right? I'm being authentic and I'm not holding anything back. And it's, you deal with the consequences because I have to step into my power and be my true self, which is willy-nilly. I'm not saying there's no truth in there, right? But it's incomplete. Or I have to tamp it down, right? And when we're living in that, it's the dichotomy. And often what we will do is we'll actually just ping pong between the two, and we'll resent both. We're like resent people for having any upset about our wild expressions, and we resent other people for when we tamp it down. And honestly, there's always infinite options, but I want to say there is another way. So one of the practices that I give people a lot is that most people have never really played with drawing their own energy, their own power in without tamping it down. And it's a very, very different process and different experience. And what most people find when they work with this is there's a certain point where they're just like, I can't handle that anymore. And that's actually what we're externalizing, is then we go, other people can't hold us or can't handle us. And what's really true is that we have not practiced our own capacity to be with ourselves in our own concentrated form. Like we know how to be a raging wildfire, and we know how to, dump water on the fire, but we don't actually know how to draw the whole magnitude of the energetic and, I want to say in some way it's even beyond energetic, but just the being of us, and pull all of the tendrils, not to tamp down, but all of the flames, or all of the tendrils, or all of the, however it is for you, and front, back, side, top, bottom, right, all around us, and actually condense them. Not minimize in any way, but condense into our own space, our own sphere, our own energetic sphere. And then actually be able to be with it, with our own selves. And that kind of a practice, which we certainly work with in the collective. I work with my one-on-one clients, and we're going to work with a lot in a program that I'm launching in July called Pleasure, Purpose, Power. It's the 3 Ps, pleasure, purpose, power. We're really going to work with that is our own capacity to be with our own power. Because when we are not afraid of ourselves, number one, other people are rarely afraid of us. Like the place where we have that experience, oh, I was too much for other people, is often where we're too much for ourselves. And we're kind of like offloading and off-gassing onto other people, because we're like, here, you hold part of it. It's too much for me. And then that is a little scary for other people. There's some accuracy to that they can't be with it, or we're too much, because we are too much for ourselves, and we're unconsciously offloading onto other people. So for most of the time, people are actually less afraid of us. We have when we condense our power, when we actually know how to be with our own power, other that we have the experience out in the world that actually somehow suddenly other people can also be with our power more. Doesn't mean no one will tell you they're intimidated by you ever again. I can promise you that. I hear it all the time, but it doesn't have the same impact. Doesn't have the same impact. And the thing is, and again, this might be a little scary for some of you to hear, but the thing is, when we cease to be afraid of our own selves and our power actually magnifies exponentially. This capacity to be with our own magnitude and our own power has our capacity for power and impact just as any place we move through the world, certainly, in terms of our work in the world, in terms of what it is that we do, in terms of, our impact and what have you, but also just who we be in the world as we move through it. Like our capacity to have the kind of impact that we want to have just walking down the street or in a one-on-one interaction, as well as in places like our business, our intimate relationships with our children globally, becomes exponentially magnified. But it is this practice truly of working with our own capacity to hold the depth and the breadth and the width of our own power that will allow for that. And allow for us to even know, I think, again, this is going back to the responsibility piece, is to even know how to be responsible for the magnitude of our power. So if we are denying it, if we are repressing and denying, if we are pretending that we are not as powerful as we are, and then inside of that, especially kind of like dissipating and off-gassing, and, we actually don't even have the correct information or data to know what responsibility is required of our unique potential for power and impact in the world. So this kind of a process is essential. It's essential. And then the last piece that I want to talk about is that, there's this thread that often is, I think, talked about more, is that what we've seen as examples of power in the world are often dominating, controlling, harmful. And that's true. And it's also the obvious thread. I think what's underneath that, or what makes that slightly more complete, is that even beyond the truth, the fact that most of us have very, very few, if any, models for what it is to use power for good in the world, is that we actually have, again, very, very few, if any, models for even what it is to truly have collaborative power. And even the examples we have, and this is not a criticism at all of, let's just say, because, everybody knows who Martin Luther King Jr. is, or they should, and I'm going to be shocked if you don't. We'll just use that as an example, incredibly powerful human being. And you can feel it, right? You can, even in just audio recordings, right? It's just like, wow, like I've listened to audio and just been brought to tears, not even by the words, right? The content of the words, which also are so incredibly moving and so incredibly powerful, but literally by the energetic transmission that is still there in audio recordings of somebody who's now been dead, for decades. So that's a potential, right? That's a potential in every single one of us. And that's an example of using power for good. And even somewhat in a community-driven way, but you can still see and you can still feel that there's a separateness. And I really believe that many or most of us are truly we're longing to see, how can our power not be separate from others, even if we're working in community with other people, even if we're community organizing, even if it's for the benefit of, we want to do with, not just for the benefit of, but for the benefit of with, or the benefit with. and creating with, and like deep, deep collaboration. And I think that this is one of like the deep rifts in our culture today, is like it's like a rending of fabric, and that we are at this juncture where we have the capacity to mend that rift, that power has been separate even when it has been used for good, but that our power can truly be with, and it can be collaborative. And that is truly, the where we can change the world. And not just change the world because we're going to do something big and amazing, and this is important, right? Systemic change and global projects and what have you, this is all very important, but there's something about the way that, again, where we can be powerful with our children, and we can be powerful with our intimate partner or partners. We can be powerful with the people we work with. We can be powerful with, as we move through the world. That's actually the place where the fabric becomes resewn at a deep communal, right, grassroots level, because it's being woven into the fabric of how we be, not just up here. And that we have not seen that, most of us, is one of the reasons that we are so afraid of our own power, is that fear of, I will be separate. I mean, there's the more obvious one, again, especially like, I'm afraid even if I think I'm a good person, I'm afraid if I have power, I won't use it for good. And even if I'm using it for good, I'll still be separate. And, again, I think of the, what do they call it? The victim, perpetrator, savior triangle. And every single one of those is an unhealthy power point, right? This is an unhealthy power pattern, the triangle, but each of them actually holds an unhealthy power gesture. But most of us, so certainly there's a gesture in the world that would rather be the perpetrator, like I'd rather be the top dog and eat everybody else. But more and more, there's actually, and certainly more of the people who come into my sphere, the truth is that we'd rather be the victim. And we all know we don't want to have victim mentality, blah, blah, blah. But we would actually rather be the victim than the perpetrator. We know that is, of course, we'd all rather be the savior. But if we're going to, if somehow we're either going to be the victim or the perpetrator, we will choose victim every time. Because that is like the better role to be. We would so much rather someone else be the asshole. And actually being the asshole is like, that's the more painful place. We think being the victim is the more painful place, but because, again, all of us know it's like actually to be the perpetrator is the more painful place. But even savior is a pain point in this unhealthy power dynamic. And what it requires is that there be some one up, one down. And with all of these threads that I've pulled in, truly the most essential step. So again, we're like, we know that we shouldn't one up and we shouldn't one down, so we try not to, but most of us will skip the most essential step, which is to be honest, to walk through the world. And it's not reifying like, oh, I really am one up from that person, I really am one down. It's not about reifying that. It's about acknowledging the truth of where we're already doing that. And we absolutely must. It is 100% imperative and essential that we actually be willing to tell the truth to ourselves about the ways that we play into this, about the ways that we will choose victim in order not to be perpetrator, about the ways that we are one up and one downing, like just walking down the street. We absolutely have to bring that from this place where it's happening back here, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes consciously, but we're like repress because we shouldn't be like that. And we have to bring it right here and be willing to like look full in the face those parts of ourselves. Oh, I think I'm a little better than that person. Oh, I think I'm a little worse. I think I'm a little worse, but I'm hoping to be better. And what this allows, like most of us are just doing this all the time. And this is the place that we are the most uncomfortable. And it is what we are all deeply, deeply longing for. And this is the place where that wide, wide, expansive power actually exists. So let's do this. All right. Sending you so much love. Ciao.